Thanks for that, Jack. You can click on rename and then put what organisation you're calling in from if you wanted to. If you've got any questions throughout, please use the hand up function in the chat. There will be time at the end for questions if you wanted to wait until then, and you're welcome to put what country you're calling in from in the chat as well. I'm going to introduce one of our facilitators today. One of them is me. I'm a little bit nervous, so please bear with me. But I really wanted to develop a presentation to help highlight the benefits of being a WA Landcare member. And I really wanted to provide a space where, if you are a member, that there is an open, we're an open book. If you wanted to ask any questions about how you can get more out of your membership, and how we can help support you in your Landcare job. I'm still relatively new to the Landcare role. It's only been 4 or 5 months, I think. So I have asked Jacqueline to jump in today and cover off on anything that I'm not able to answer adequately. And I also wanted her to give a brief intro as well before we start the presentation. But before we do that, I just wanted to also, Alex, if you could pop your hand up. Alex Kripos is joining us from Melbourne, and he is our rep from the insurance scheme provider Sonata. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, please correct me, Alex.
Fine, yeah.
Okay, great. And he's going to provide some more information on the discounted insurance scheme that's available to WA Landcare Network members. We've also got a lovely video message from Mick Davis, our chair, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, and he's going to chat to you about what WA Landcare means to him. And how important it is to him to be part of that collective voice for Landcare in Western Australia. We've also got some WA Landcare members on the call with us today who I invited to come and share their experiences with you. And, you know, who's better placed to talk about the benefits of being a WA Landcare member than a member themselves. So I'll introduce them as we move through the chat. Okay, Jack, would you mind giving a brief introduction, please?
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Case. Yeah, I just wanted to say that as part of the WA Landcare Network, it's a wonderful thing that you do by being a member, because apart from I think there's maybe over 6,000 collectively members now represented by member groups across the state, but we're part of the National Landcare Network too, and we have 160,000 members, and that's growing, you know, weekly across the country. That gives us a voice, and that voice works for us in terms of policy, advocacy, and seeking funding. We know that things are tight and always seem to be becoming tighter in the environmental department in some ways, and then at other times it looks like there's lots of money around. One of our key roles for you is to advocate for appropriate policy change, that we hear from the grassroots community across Australia that that's what they're looking for, and for funding opportunities. At the moment, we are looking, there's some new, the Landcare Bodies funding is about to be announced and the guidelines are coming out. And as members, I'll be doing a communique that keeps you all informed about what we're applying for and what we feel our chances are. And that is a key component of our funding, as Casey said before, state NRM and the National Landcare Network. So thank you for being here. Every one of you that participates in the network as a member adds to our numbers and our body of expertise from the ground up. We're really connected, and grassroots is who we're here to represent. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jack. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll stop sharing when Alex is due to present, but fingers crossed that this all works. Can everyone see that okay? Yep, awesome. Okay. So I'm hoping that if you are not already a member, that you will join the WA Landcare Network and be a part of the collective voice for Landcare in Western Australia. Oop, back. And again, I just want to acknowledge that the WA Landcare Network acknowledges Aboriginal Australians as the first land carers of our country and recognises their continuing connection to land, water and community. WALN fosters genuine collaboration with our First Nations people across WA to jointly care for country. So what is the WA Landcare Network? So these are kind of our three pillars, I suppose, of who we are and what we do. So the first one is that we advocate and we represent. So listening to and sharing the collective voice of the WA Landcare movement with federal and state decision makers. And we'll go into that a little bit more soon. We are here to network and consult and help you to do those things by developing and increasing membership and stakeholder links, while providing a wide range of opportunities for knowledge sharing through our products and services, which we'll also talk about. And we're here to build and sustain capacity for the sector by developing and increasing membership and stakeholder links, while providing a wide range of opportunities for knowledge sharing. So there's two types of memberships, and sometimes this can get really confusing for people. So I think this presentation is a good opportunity to just sort that out. So ordinary members are open to any community group with an interest in Landcare, and associate members are open to individuals, local government authorities, businesses and research organisations engaged in Landcare. And we always, at our Landcare Checks team, have a vast range of people that fall into both of these categories. And the WALN associate members have the same benefits as an ordinary member, but the only difference is that ordinary members have access to voting rights at our AGMs and also the WA Landcare insurance scheme. So who are our members? We have such a diversity here. Every time we do a Landcare Checks In or a Landcare Build Skills and I print out who's attending, I'm always blown away at the diversity and the width and breadth of people that we represent and people that are interested in what we do. And so we support a diverse range of organisations and individuals with an interest and passion in Landcare. And week on week, we're seeing that membership base increase, which is really exciting for me in this role. So currently we have 191 ordinary members and 155 associate members. So this is our operations team. We are supported by a diverse and experienced executive committee as well, and a finance officer and volunteer membership officer as well. And you can learn more about our team on our website. So top of the ranks here is our executive officer, Jacqueline Larnay. And she has such a beautiful background in operational roles around community and our First Nations as well. Our communications officer, Carolyn, has got an incredible track record spanning over 2 decades in the natural resource management space. And me, membership development manager. I have lots of experience in the conservation and not-for-profit sector. And the reason that I joined WALN is because I have a real passion for grassroots movements and supporting boots on the ground efforts. And it doesn't get any more boots on the ground than the Landcare movement, in my opinion. So what are some of the benefits of joining WALN? Why would you want to join us? We have this fantastic Parliamentary Friends of Landcare that's been really developed this year by Jack. And it's a connection for grassroots groups to state and federal decision makers. And I'd like Jack to talk to that, if that's okay.
Sure, okay, thank you. Yeah, look, it wasn't overnight in the making. On the screen there, you can see at the front in the purple jumper is Helen Watkins. Helen was worked very closely with Shane Love, who ultimately became the opposition leader, and they'd been speaking about forming a Parliamentary Friends of Landcare group for some time, in mirroring what happens at the federal level, but it is a different sort of process. But for us back in March, I think it was Casey's first week or the week before she joined us, and we were pulling together this event with 200 people in the courtyard at Parliament House. As you can see, a beautiful diverse representation of our members there to connect. And the way that Parliamentary Friends of Landcare works is that everyone in Parliament is automatically a member. So if you have a concern that you want to raise with your local MP, you can let them know that you're aware that there's a Parliamentary Friends of Landcare group in WA. The co-conveners are there in the photo, Shane Love and Darren West. And if you're having concerns in getting in contact with your MPs, there's information that you want to share, an event you want to promote, we can give you contact details to go through them. They disseminate that out through the list of parliamentarians. So it's a great connection and an enduring relationship we hope that will develop and last over a long period of time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. And we want to work with you to build capacity and to help you do what you do best through our various products and services, which include a comprehensive monthly newsletter, which we're very proud of. We work very hard on to provide the most current information that's really valid to what you do in your Landcare space. Our monthly online networking, which Ella mentioned, has been really valuable and she's looking out for these days, which is great to hear. And our professional development sessions as well. So they are called Landcare Checks In and Landcare Build Skills. We do 4 Landcare Build Skills a year, which are more in-depth webinars around particular skills building that skills that have been identified as being needed to be encouraged in the space. And then our monthly Landcare Checks In, which we develop around like our knowledge around the space, but also in response to what our members want to hear about as well. So you have a lot of buy-in when it comes to these products and services that we're developing for you. We also provide opportunities to network and share knowledge and resources with other groups across the state at our annual gatherings, which is coming up in December, and also hot topic forums. And we are running an ESG forum in November, so I'll chat to you about that at the end. And we advocate for increased funding for community landcare at state and federal level, which helps you do your landcare job. So we're able to divert some funds that come to us to our members to be able to do some small projects on ground, which is fantastic, which is really great. It's one of my favourite things that we are able to do. And you get to share the good work that you're doing to a wider audience through our Landcarers in Profile, which we run on our social media and newsletters, through our case studies that are available on the website and our social media shout outs as well. So often when we've got grassroots organisations, they're running on the smell of an oily rag and they don't have the time, capacity, and sometimes the skills to be able to tell their story. So we are best placed to be able to help you to push out to the world what you're actually doing. Our newsletters go out to over 700 people. So, and we love to share the good news stories and the bad news stories, the challenges as well as the successes with everybody that's in our space. And one of the things that's least explored, but potentially has a lot of value to you, is our affordable Landcare insurance scheme that's tailored to the Landcare sector. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'll get Alex to start sharing his screen. Thanks, Alex. You're just on mute there.
Sorry, classic. Thanks very much for that, Casey. I'll just share my screen now. Okay, can you all see that? Is that okay? Yeah, okay. If anyone missed the introduction, I'm Alex. I'm calling in from Naarm, Melbourne, and I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the traditional owners of the land over here. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging. And thanks very much to Jacqueline and Casey for organising this. It's been really, I feel like we haven't had many introductions or face-to-face meetings before, so it's nice to break down that barrier a little bit. And I think people, tend to not think too much about what we do here as on the insurance side of things, but I want to kind of show that we're here to help you today, and we've come together to put together a really key benefit for all Landcare groups that everyone should be taking advantage of, because yeah, it's there, it's ready to go. So I'll take you through it step by step, and this is all very basic information. So you're probably going to have some questions afterwards, and that's fine. We can go through. I've got some FAQs to cover off as well that will hopefully answer some of those questions. But I'm hoping today you'll leave with the understanding that of what the scheme is about, what it sort of covers a little bit, like some basic covers, and where you think that your group might fit in with the scheme. So just a general advice disclaimer here. So everything I'm going to be talking to you about right now is just general in nature. So this is just part of compliance. If you contact me directly, we can talk in more detail about your particular circumstances, but just take this information as general. Okay, so what is an insurance scheme? So I often get asked, or people often compare their home policies or their car policies to because that is what they've got experience with when it comes to insurance, and they try and compare it to the scheme that we have organised, and it's not quite the same. It's not really comparing apples with apples. So a scheme, as opposed to like your personal insurance, it is based off a master policy. So this is a policy that gets set up by an insurance company. And essentially, we have organizations that can get together with and kind of get a bit of group buying power to get in on this master policy and essentially share the cost, as well as provide a premium pool for the insurer to, if there is a claim, they have a pool of premium that they can then, take money out of for that claim. So it's kind of like just sharing the load across many different organizations. And typically these are really hard to set up and get over the line, because we kind of have to say to insurers, we have to kind of sell it to them and make a case and say, look, this is, we think you'll still be able to make money based on this scheme, but this is particular. These are the particulars of things that we want to get covered in kind of response to that. So one thing we've done here with the Landcare scheme is we took like a Landcare use case essentially, and we initially developed this with Landcare New South Wales about 5 or 6 years ago, and then it was so successful that we just expanded it to the whole country. So every state now has, we do have a group in every state. So Landcare WA is definitely the biggest at the moment, so that's great. And we went to the insurer and we said, this is the risk for what we believe is the typical Landcare group. So what's your best price that you can give us per Landcare group to join that scheme? So we've been able to achieve low premiums for everybody that's on the scheme, as well as covering what is pretty much a typical Landcare group. And we always do have outliers who, they're a Landcare group, but they also run a music festival. So it's like there are things where it gets more complicated, and that's where we kind of talk a bit about the scope of insurance, which I'll talk to in a second. This is just a little snapshot of who we are. So Senator Insurance. So my mum started this business. She's the one sitting in the middle, if you couldn't tell. And I came on board probably 3 years after she set it up, just to get it all running. And we ran it as just a duo for quite a while. And then my sister's partner came on board in the last year. So it's a family business. We are fairly small as far as business goes, but we do have, we write quite a diverse range of products. So it's not just the Landcare schemes. We also do another scheme for the Stedford groups, if you've heard of, Rocker Stedfords and all that sort of thing. We organise another scheme for that. And then we just do a lot of general insurance, so landlord insurance and property insurance and motor insurance and stuff like that. So it's all pretty diverse. Community underwriting, so they're the underwriter that we have partnered with to put the scheme together. And community underwriting is a pretty special organisation, because they kind of approach insurance in a very different way. They are almost strictly work with not-for-profits, and they started out with writing insurance for the Meals on Wheels program, which is a not-for-profit that delivers meals to the homeless. And that's where they started their business, and they expanded from there. So they were really our number one choice when coming to an insurer saying, look, we've got this group of landcare organisations that are community focused and not for profit. How can we make this work into an arrangement that we are getting cover for these groups that haven't previously been able to get cover for any sort of affordable price? So we have a very good relationship with them, and yeah, we've been working with them for the last 5 or 6 years. Okay, so the scope of insurance. Now, when we were talking before about the scheme and how it differs from a regular insurance policy, because we've gone to the insurer and said, look, this is, what's your best price? What's your minimum premiums essentially for you to cover a narrowed scope of insurance? So if you were to go out and buy a general insurance policy, it would probably cover you for a very broad range of things, where this insurance policy covers you for a very specific list of activities, and it's a lot more focused in on those activities compared to a regular policy. So in one case, that's not the best option if you were trying to look for the broadest cover available. But on the other hand, you would then have to pay for quite a lot, quite a higher premium that you probably wouldn't be using like the full breadth of that coverage anyway. So I like to think of it more as it's focused to community landcare groups and a typical community landcare group. So the way when I talk to new groups that want to find insurance or want to come and see if the insurance is going to work for them, for the insurance scheme, then this is the first port of call. We kind of just have a discussion about whether or not the group fits within the scope of the insurance and the activities listed here. So the slide has listed out all those dot points at the bottom. There's some of the activities that are included, and you can take a screenshot, or we can send this through later or whatnot if you want to have a look over it. But essentially, it is just confirming that your group is going to have coverage within the scheme if you're a typical sort of situation. But like I said, there's always groups that are doing something else. So, you might be, you might be running another typical one is a nursery. A nursery is outside of the scheme because it's a very different risk. So it's not what we would consider a typical landcare group, like a typical landcare group activity to be. And there are some groups that, they might work with a nursery to get seedlings to replant them. That's different. That's okay. We can talk about that. But if you're running like a retail shop from a nursery, then that sort of thing isn't covered. So these are the little details where, it's good to have a conversation about and just be upfront about the activities that you're doing. Okay, so we'll go over the actual policies that are in the scheme. So there's 3 policies. The general liability is probably the one that you'll be thinking of the most. So general liability is your public liability. So it's actually made up of 2 covers. So it's public liability and products liability. So the products liability side of it is probably less relevant to landcare groups, but it's one of these things where the general liability policy as a product just always comes along with the products liability. They go hand in hand. You don't separate them essentially. So the limit we have for the public liability is $20 million. And this will give you coverage for things like any third-party property damage or injury that might be caused by, the actions of your group. So let's say, for example, you're out, doing some replanting or something, and somebody knocks over a power pole. You know, it's like that's third-party damage that's going to run your organization up a fair bill to have that repaired. And this is the sort of thing where you would have coverage under the policy for that. The voluntary workers personal accident policy, so bit of a mouthful, but essentially what it's saying is it's the type of policy is personal accident. So this, while a general liability policy gives you your organization protection against, you know, third-party property damage or injury, a voluntary workers personal accident policy is thinking more about the volunteer and providing accident cover to that volunteer. So if your volunteer is doing some planting and they cut themselves or they injure themselves and they, you know, let's say they can't go to work or something like that, that's a pretty serious situation for somebody that is volunteering their time for your organization. So if you have the personal accident policy, then there could be a weekly benefit of up to between $1,000 and $2,000 per week until that person is recovered. Or even if there is maybe death, or if a volunteer is very seriously injured, so they lose a limb or a finger or something like that, then there is also a capital benefit, which is $100,000. So in the way it works is there's a whole list, and this sounds a bit morbid, but there's a whole list of injuries that could take place that are in the PDS, and they have a percentage. So, you know, if you've lop a finger off, it might be 15% of the capital benefit or something like that. So it works like that, and that's something you can go into detail and have a look at. And then we do have some banding around how many volunteers you have working for your organization. So the banding starts at up to 20 volunteers and it goes up to over 50 volunteers. And this is just essentially the underwriter needing to know the size of the group or the organization, what's being done. And this would include, this number particularly would include volunteers, that casual volunteers. So let's say you had a field day and, you had 5 strangers show up that you haven't met before and you sign them up and they've volunteered for a day. They would all count as one volunteer, even if you don't see them for the rest of the year. So you just got to keep that in mind. And when we put that policy in place, you'd just have like a, you would just kind of estimate how many volunteers you'd have, and we could work it out if it went over, but that's okay. And I'll just talk a little bit about aggregates. So I think I maybe skipped over in the last, there was another aggregate limit here, the $20 million products liability limit. So with aggregate limits, that's taking into account the whole scheme. So let's say that there's 100 Landcare organizations that are a part of the scheme insurance for that year. Then there is a $20 million products liability aggregate limit. So that means everybody's sharing that $20 million. So if one group has a claim, then that's coming out of the pool or the kitty for everybody else in that group. So for the public liability, because that's a really essential cover that you can't really reduce that, it's $20 million for everybody. So everyone all 100 groups will have the $20 million public liability. And then all 100 groups would share the 20 million products liability, which again, not a big deal for Landcare groups. So for the voluntary workers personal accident, the aggregate for this aggregate limit for this policy is $2 million. So we've had, if you consider that the capital benefit is $100,000 and that it's usually a percentage of that amount, and we've probably only had one, I think we've only had one voluntary workers personal accident claim in the last 5 or 6 years, and that was about $14,000. So it's still quite a big limit, for even though it is a lot reduced compared to the products liability one. Okay, now association liability. So it's probably the most complicated policy, but we do think it is very important for organisations that have a you know, you should all be probably incorporated, I imagine, and you all have volunteer committee members, and anyone that might be, you know, on a board or anything like that, then they would be volunteering their time, and it's a bit risky for those sort of volunteers, because if you don't have coverage, if someone, let's say you have a defamation claim, which we actually had a claim the other day, and you didn't have association liability cover, then any sort of legal cost would have to be funded by your organisation. And if your organisation didn't have the money, then the claimants could actually come after the individual directors and committee members. So that's where it starts to get a little bit scary when you don't have directors and officers liability cover. So that's one of the covers. So this association liability cover is made up of these key covers you can see at the bottom of the screen here. So the employment practices cover, that gives you some cover for, so even if you have volunteers that are working for your group, they are considered in the eyes of insurance and law to be employees when it comes to employment practices. So if someone's bullied or abused or anything like that in your organisation, they can actually sue you. So that's where you would have some coverage for that. The directors and officers liability, professional indemnity. So if your group is providing a professional service, it could be important to have professional indemnity cover, because if something goes wrong after you gave advice that was professional, then yeah, you could find yourself in trouble. Libel and slander cover. Yep. So as again, I'll give you a little claim example. So the other day we had a Landcare member that went on record for defamation, or you know, somebody claimed that they defamed them in the press, and then they essentially engaged with us to say that they were going to make a claim, and it was their lawyer that was, you know, pushing this. So what the insurer did was, instead of that claimant, instead of the Landcare member having to manage this themselves and try and find like a lawyer to represent them, we actually had the insurer's lawyers that were there and stepped in and then started the legal proceedings on their behalf. And that's what the claim was made up of. Essentially, it's essentially the legal cost to cover that. So it hasn't finished yet, so we don't know how much that's going to cost, but it's just a little highlight of where something kind of seemingly insignificant can blow up when it comes to legal fees. And then there's a few extra covers there, but I won't go through all of them. But it is a cover that provides quite a bit of cover around running your organisation and the people that are involved with doing that. So we think it's important to get, and it's actually quite cheap. So it's only a couple $100, and when you look at how much this policy would cost you if you were doing it outside the scheme, it would be well over $1,000, $1,200 is the sort of thing where you'd be, the sort of price you'd be expecting. So it's actually good value. Again, we've got a $1 million, $2 million, or $5 million limit, so you can choose. You know, the premiums go up based on what you choose there, but yeah, $1 million is quite cheap to get. There's $10 million limit in the aggregate, and then you would just choose up the number of volunteers that you had. And these would be not volunteers that show up to a dig. This would be volunteers that run your organisation. Oops, sorry. I have some FAQs. Do you want to go through the FAQs? Do we have enough time, or do you want to?
I think, Alex, it'd be good to just see if there's any questions at this point, because that was a lot of really rich information. I've learned a huge amount myself. Thank you.
That's okay.
We can certainly circulate the facts. And if you want to stop sharing for a minute, we'll just see what the audience has to say.
Sure thing.
Is there anyone on the call that benefits from our insurance scheme at the moment, or was joining to find out more about that specifically?
Not necessarily at this point in time. And look, I do believe it is an area that we have not probably promoted as strongly as we could. We know some members join because they've heard about the insurance and they really want it. And you get a couple of join-ups a month, Alex, in terms of people wanting to take up the insurance opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we definitely get a few people a month. Whether or not they all fit within the scheme, that's something we work out. But yeah, it's definitely, as far as the pricing goes, it is definitely a key benefit for any small group that is looking to, yeah, really, like some groups they really need to get, or they're trying to get started, and they could at least get the general liability policy. You don't have to get them all at the once. We can separate them, and you pretty much, you should definitely not be operating any sort of Landcare group if you don't have general liability insurance, because that's your bare minimum coverage that you need. Otherwise, you can find yourself in some serious trouble.
I made a note here too, Alex, that you spoke about groups being incorporated. There's a bit of an assumption that they all are, and of course many smaller groups aren't.
Yes.
And becoming incorporated today, I was just on a call earlier to Canberra about the increasing compliance requirements for the Australian Charities Commission, and all of the responsibilities and pressures that sit around small groups now, and not all groups certainly are incorporated. So where do they sit? Are they not eligible, or could they auspice through us, or how would that work?
Yeah, so currently for this insurance scheme, every group that wants to join independently as their own group needs to be incorporated, because having that incorporation from the insurer's perspective is assuring that you've got a minimum level of compliance achieved. And that's very important for the insurer to tick that box. The other thing that's important is that if you're not an incorporated group, if you're unincorporated, then you don't really exist as a legal entity. So if somebody wants to, if somebody makes a claim against the unincorporated group, they're not really making a claim against the group per se. They're making a claim against all the individuals that are involved with that group. So it is probably in the best interest of every group to be incorporated, to give themselves a little bit of protection, because I think personally, I wouldn't want to be volunteering for an organization that I know I'm on the hook for if somebody comes with a claim. Essentially, there needs to be some sort of protection for a volunteer that is involved in that organization. The key, a way around it, because we do have some groups that are just not going to get incorporated because they can't, and that's okay. So what we essentially advise them is that the best thing to do would be to join up with a larger organization that does have an insurance policy, and then become a subgroup of that group. But you would have to do that on an official level. So that larger organization would need to manage all your finances, would be pulling all the shots, and essentially you would have to give up your independence as a group to do that. But then on the other hand, you don't pay insurance costs. So it's kind of like a, what do you prefer, to work independently? Okay, then you have to incorporate. If you're happy not really to work independently and you're happy for someone else to call the shots, then that's fine. You can get cover and not have to pay.
And that, Jack, that might be another Landcare checks in to talk about the pros and cons of incorporation and what's involved in that, because I think a lot of our groups would be on the smaller unincorporated side. So they might find that conversation valuable at another time.
I think so. I think it's invaluable to have that distinction and to recognise. And I think what we'd pick up on in the Landcare checks in, Alex, is that what you said is, groups that become subgroups might feel like they're giving up their autonomy. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, in terms of WALN, we sponsor a group called the Coastal Marine Community Network. and they're working towards incorporation, but they're very much a part of our organisation. Any funding they receive comes to us. We equip their finances. We pay the contractors, that sort of situation. And I think there's a bit of that around the place where some larger groups are like umbrellas for smaller groups, but it's really important to know. Thank you.
That's okay.
So I might move on, if that's okay, Alex. Thank you so much for that super valuable information. I'll just go back to sharing my screen. Can everyone see that okay? Yep, great. Oh. And so I wanted Mick to join the call, but we might have been on here for a few hours, so I got him to actually do a little I got him to do a little message so we could keep it short and sweet. So here's a word from our chair, the wonderful Mick Davis, about his views on the WA Landcare Network.
Got a problem with the volume, Case. I think you might need to go back into the presentation and click the full screen, because we're seeing it as per.
I'll give that a try. Is that okay?
It was playing beautifully last time I looked at it, but for some reason is
not working.
Well, it's running, but this voiceover's not coming through.
Ah, that's annoying. It's been working perfectly. That's always the way. I might move on then, Jack.
Yes, I think, and Mick is a member of the Upper Lesmurdie Falls group. He works for an NRM regional body. He's our chair. He was our deputy chair for a while, and he was sharing some of that with you and some of the positive experiences his group has had through WALN products and services. So we'll leave Mick there and move on, and he certainly didn't take up any time today.
It's all worked perfectly. What I will do is send through the recording and people can flick through to that, because I'm sure, it's just a little glitch in the system. Oh, is that okay? I'm going to completely move on from my videos. They don't seem to be working, which is a shame. Ella is still on the line. Thank you so much for your patience, Ella. I wanted to get a few member testimonials from our members, and Ella is a very active and enthusiastic participator and member, and she's the Senior Landcare Officer for Katanning Landcare. So, Ella, I just wanted to have you talk to your experience with WA Landcare and the benefits that you have found.
Perhaps stop
to unmute
sharing.
First,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I am a real person here right now to run a recording, so I should work, hopefully. Yeah, so I'm Senior Landcare Officer at Katanning Landcare, and I thought I'd just sort of go backwards a little bit to go forwards, I suppose. So I started as a volunteer in Landcare as a teenager in the mid-90s. I was then on the Bannister Creek Catchment Group Committee at the turn of the century, which makes it sound really old. And then I've been Landcare Officer out in Katanning, originally at Dumbleyung, and now Katanning, 20 years in this sort of role now. And I've been on the Australian Landcare Council, and I've been on the steering committee for one of the national conferences, and I've been on the IRLF steering committee, and so lots of different roles in Landcare I've had over a number of years. But at the risk of sounding old, which I'm trying to avoid doing, but apparently I'm old now. I found back in the early days of being a Landcare officer, there were a lot of Landcare groups and there were a lot of Landcare officers around the place. There was one in every town, and we had a lot of get-togethers, and we had a lot of field days, and we had a lot of training, we did a lot of planning. The Blackwood Basin group was really active. Their regional bodies were only just sort of starting up, and we're doing a lot of strategic planning. And we had a lot of extension officers, a lot of training and all that sort of thing. So as a result, we saw each other a lot. The Landcare community connected with each other a lot. There was a lot of peer support. There was a lot of peer networking. you know, there was someone in every town, you used the neighbouring towns, there was a lot of partnerships going on. But what I found is as time has gone on, a lot of things have happened. One of those is Landcare has gotten more complex than what it was 20 odd years ago. We now cross over a lot more policy spaces. We used to just sort of plant trees kind of thing, but now we're playing in agriculture, we're playing in carbon markets, we're playing in human health and well-being and community development, we're playing in education, we're playing across a lot of spaces. So it's gotten more complex. The job itself, whether that be as a paid land care officer or a committee position or a volunteer leader in on those smaller groups, has also got a lot harder. There's a lot more compliance. There is a lot more reporting. There is a lot more OH&S. There's a lot more volunteer management. We're now having to be good at things like media and social media and all that sort of stuff. Projects need to be so much more innovative to attract money. The job has got more complex. And at the same time, what's happened is the peer network's dropped away. There are a lot less land care groups out there. There's a lot less land care officers out here. Obviously, we're, you know, agricultural region in Katanning. We now don't have a land care group in every town. You know, you'll go 100 kilometres before you find the next group. So there's less people out here, and I find people have got really busy. There are so many more limitations. The issues are more complex to handle, and so we've become a lot more isolated. I think we've become a lot more isolated in the way we do our work and the way we cross-pollinate ideas and the way we support each other. And so this is coming into what I see as the role of the WA Landcare Network, and I'm that old. I remember the inception of the WA Landcare Network. I was around at that point. And it's sort of becoming a role. To me, it's big value for me as a practitioner who's working on the ground in communities doing land care every day. It's been a gap filler for what we have lost, gone past. One of the big things is in bringing us together. We don't necessarily physically get together, but webinars, like I was saying at the start, I think these monthly checks in and build skills are becoming a bit of a connecting point. And I think that's really important because we actually get to see each other, even though it's on screen and not in person. But our opportunities to talk, to share ideas, and also sometimes just to remember that there are other people out there. We're not the only ones. And I think that's really important. Of course, there's the events that WALN holds, and I don't get to many of them. And I think that's a lot of a case. And I think obviously time, people are busy, but I think when our projects are so more complex, every dollar has to be so much more heavily accounted for. In allowing that time and money for travel is becoming so much more locked down than it ever used to be as well. And I think this is a symptom of the way Landcare has been going. So that's something that WALN is giving us those opportunities to do. I think the second big category, I think, of the role of WALN and the importance of being involved is, and Jacqueline mentioned that earlier, was about the policy advocacy. Landcare and NRM is a complex space. It does cross a lot of areas. And I think the way government policy is set impacts us a lot, and it impacts the environment we're working on. It impacts the community and the landholders that we're working with. But there's time and energy and scale in being able to stand up and say those things that are needed to be said from Landcare, but for an individual group. But by us being able to feed into a representative body like WALN, and WALN to be able to take that higher, that gives us an opportunity that I think we miss. Because I think a lot of Landcare decision making in NRM and government has run away from us a bit. Like I was in the Australian Landcare Council and we were doing policy direct input directly into the federal minister. We were kind of like the voice of Landcare, except we were legislators, not constituted, and so we were abolished. And that's business. So I think WALN's got a big role in that, and that we can talk into, and that's two-way as well. That's WALN taking policy information and putting it into layman's terms for the volunteer who hasn't got a degree in environmental policy and law and a lot of time to understand these things. WALN can do that, and I think that's really, really important. And of course, setting up things like the Parliamentary Friends of Landcare and getting that connection in there is something that we as individual groups can't achieve. And that's something the collective power is there. particularly since there aren't so many of us groups anymore, and we are more understaffed and more overworked than we've ever been. And of course, insurance. Now, of course, Alex's presentation has covered a lot of that. We at Containing Landcare, one of the few LCDCs that are actually left in Western Australia. So we're actually not running as an incorporated body. So our LCDC gives us insurance through the Soil and Land Conservation Act. But for most groups operating in WA, they don't have that. And so I'm well aware that that's, although it's not a space I've played in because we've got a different setup, that's really important. So yeah, Containing Landcare members of WALN, and we have been members for probably since the start, I reckon, maybe. We're a big Landcare group. You know, we've been around since 1990. We're a strong Landcare group. We're good at what we do, and we see value in belonging to WALN, and we like those opportunities to connect. It's also an opportunity for not just us to share, but there's a lot of smaller groups that maybe can access bigger, more experienced groups like ours, and those connections can be made through WALN. And by actually meeting each other, we can do that kind of support. So, but when it comes down to it, I think we all need to be connected. We are working in a complex space, and it can become overwhelming, it can become tiring, but being able to connect in with other people that are in the same space and have that same passion, that's, to me, in itself is just a huge value straight up. So yes, there is my brief rundown of 20 years of history and why we belong to WALN.
That was absolutely fabulous, Ella. Thank you so much, because it's terrific to hear it from the other side of the fence, if you like. You know, we're all in the same paddock, but we are delivering, and it's great to hear back from groups the validity of the offer and how we're trying to respond, because one of the things we write in every application, state and federal, is about professional isolation and about how that has been brought about through this rationalist economic approach to environmental care, and how that's becoming more so with the environmental marketplace. You know, government's looking at this cost shifting exercise. And so the points you make there are wonderful, and I hope you don't mind, but you might be seeing a whole lot of your speech on our socials in a little while, because there's a summary there that gives that historical perspective from lived experience. You've lived that, and you articulate it so well about the power that was in the movement when there was enough people and that the support was there. And that's in the days when, relatively speaking, Landcare was a much simpler proposition than it is today. All of those complexities and wheels. I did a graph the other day for someone and showed this role I'm looking at, trying to get some funding to go out into the groups, but there's like 25 different things going on around that wheel at any one time, in addition to core business that you're expected to have some knowledge of or participation in. It's incredibly complex.
It's a very complex job. I've actually described it as juggling burning chainsaws while people are throwing penguins at you. You want to catch the penguins and save them, but you're trying to not kill yourself from the burning chainsaws.
That is so graphic.
There's
and
not
so
a lot of
visual.
penguins in Containing, but yeah, that rationalisation, I think, is a huge thing. When I started, I was in Dumbleyung. We had a Landcare officer in Kent. We had a Landcare officer in Wickerton. We had a Landcare officer in Wagen. We had a Landcare officer in Containing. We had one in Broome Hill. We had one in West Arthur. We had one in Kojana. So we were there. It is now Containing, Cranbrook, Wagen. That's it.
Really valuable input there, Ella. Thank you so much.
I think there's a book in that, Ella. I really do. I know you've got plenty of chainsaws to juggle, but I think there's a book there.
Yeah, I agree.
In all my spare time.
We also had Callie Howlett join us from Care for Headland. She's the chairperson there, but unfortunately she had to jump off the call. Jack, are you able to read in the chat? She just dropped a little something into the chat there.
Oh, sure. Hang on.
Yeah.
And we're nearly out of time, so it's not too much of an issue. I think what Kelly was going to say. Care for Headland truly values the support, networks and ability to collaborate together on projects. We've appreciated the funding support and the wider connection to your membership and networks. Thank you. So they're a relatively new group to us, very established group in Headland. We had a program earlier in the year and last year called Sharing Solutions, and that was about working with groups who are very remote and who really are at that risk as well of that professional isolation. And they had a fantastic experience of setting up their own little versions of Landcare Checks In and Landcare Build Skills to build that connection and support for each other in their communities. Back to you, Kate.
So the $6 million question, how much does it cost? This completely blew me away when I started. It's completely free. It's free to all members, which is just such an incredible plus, I think. How do I join? You just have to head over to our website and click on join now. It's super, super simple. If anyone on the call has any questions right now, the floor is open to you. We've got a few more minutes, but you can always call or email me at mdm@landcarewa.org.au. I prefer to talk on the phone and have a yarn though, so please reach out for my direct number, and I'd love to talk to you more about bringing you on board as a member, and I'm very grateful to everyone that's joined in today. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions or comments? Special thanks to Alex from Zooming all the way from Melbourne to join us and share about insurance. You've really raised some things there that's got my brain going, because this morning I was talking nationally about, we've had groups approach us obviously about the content of Build Skills and Checks In, but also about other schemes like insurance. People are struggling with finding, banking that gives them the service they need as such small groups. People are struggling to get accountancy services when it comes to auditing their projects, because there's a real shortage of bookkeepers and auditors in the state at the moment. So there's a few evolving conversations for WALN about how can we continue to add to those suite of things that we do that make life easier, so that land carers can do what they love and get out there and do that wonderful important thing of getting some more trees in the ground, protecting biodiversity, engaging community, working with all those different spaces Ella spoke about, agriculture as well, and everyone leveraging, multiplying and adding value to what each other's doing. So we'll keep you posted. Casey's got an event coming up, Case, that was actually stimulated by a request from Ella.
Yes. On the 14th of November, we've got a Landcare Build Skills that's going to be around media and interview skills for land carers. So we're going to have a focus on earned media, public speaking, bridging and key messaging, as well as a little bit on social media as well. We've got some really great presenters, so keep an eye on our newsletter and our communications channels for more information. We've also got a ESG, Environmental Social Governance forum coming up on Wednesday the 1st, Jack, 9:30 till 12, and you can check out our Humanitics link to register for that. That's going to be really valuable. We've got some great guest speakers already lined up for that one. So thank you so much to everybody for joining today. It was lovely to see everyone. Alex, thanks so much for joining in from Melbourne, and hopefully we'll see you all next month. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.